Today we're breaking down every 70-200 option for Sony full-frame mirrorless cameras to help you decide which one is going to be best for you. This includes the amazing Sony 70-200 f2.8 G Master Mark II, the 70-200 f4 Macro Mark II from Sony, the newer Sigma 70-200 f2.8 DGD-N Sports Lens, and of course the Tamron 70-180 f2.8 G2. There are some previous models to these lenses, but I'm just covering the most up-to-date ones. We're going to go through and figure out which one's going to be best for you, of course, and there's a lot of things to consider with today's options. If you are considering a bigger lens, know that I have a few videos on some bigger telephotos like a 100-400 and a 200-600 and so forth, and I'll link that video up there if you're considering something bigger than this. So having said that, guys, there's going to be some pros and cons depending on the brand that you choose. If you weren't aware, third-party lenses do have some limitations and restrictions, but some of the pros tend to be they're considerably cheaper with around the same performance. So just know in terms of things you're not going to be able to use is in-camera features like focus breathing compensation, and often shooting speed will be capped around 15 frames per second and autofocus continuous. So something to consider if you are looking to get the most out of your camera if you happen to be an owner of something that shoots really fast like an A9 or a Sony A1 or something. Also, typically only the Sonys are going to have access to teleconverters, in this case the 1.4 and the 2x teleconverter that can essentially make your lens transform to something with a lot more reach without compromising too much image quality. Sadly, they're not readily available for third-party options a lot of the time. So some things to consider, but let's have a look at the price of these four options. Of course, that's going to be a huge contributing factor for a lot of people, myself included, and here's how they stack up. Obviously, the G Master Mark II is going to be the most expensive, but spoiler alert, it's the best lens. It's phenomenal, and of course, we're going to see a breakdown and some examples come out here shortly, but if you do want to see a full in-depth review on any of these lenses, I do have one for each. So let me know down in the comments how much the price of a lens does impact your buying decision and what aspects actually make you pull the trigger. Of course, the size and the weight of a lens is another big factor, especially for some people that have mobility issues or just don't like carrying around huge, heavy lenses. Now, the good news is that these four lenses are completely reasonable in my opinion, but they do vary quite a bit in terms of size and weight. Let's have a look in a bit more detail at each lens to give you an idea of what they're capable of.
First up is the G Master Mark II. Let's dive in and look at the build and features of this lens, both of which are fantastic. With the lens hood installed, this is going to measure just under 11 inches long, and without, you're looking at just under 8 inches long. Now, one of the major improvements of this lens over its predecessor is its incredible weight reduction of just about a third, which is just incredible and definitely noticeable. For features, buttons, and switches, this thing definitely has you covered with an automatic manual focus switch, a full-time manual focus override option, a focus limiting switch of course, your image stabilization with 3 modes, and now an iris lock which gives you more control when it comes to your aperture adjustment. It also has 3 programmable customizable focus hold buttons, so you can really dial this thing exactly how you like it. Next up, it's got an incredibly impressive short throw for easy target acquisition from 70 all the way up to 200. For you video shooters, it does have the addition now of an aperture ring like we're seeing on more and more lenses these days. Both the zoom and the focus rings are nice and grippy, and the manual focus experience is actually really nice, but it is a very fine adjustment, meaning you can blow past your subject quite easily. For me, the removable and easily adjustable tripod collar is also a great feature. On the front, you'll find a familiar 77mm filter threads, as well as Sony's Nano AR Coating Mark II for maximum clarity. On the back, of course, a nice metal mount with a rubber gasket for confidence in weather sealing. Now, this lens is apparently very well weather sealed, and I can vouch for it in some pretty heavy rain conditions. Nothing too crazy, but definitely no issues there. Now, when it comes to photography, this thing is on another level. Pair it with something like I did, like the A1 here, and it's capable of shooting 30 frames per second with mind-blowing accuracy. As you can see here, pretty much 100% accuracy with a subject moving very, very quickly. Absolutely no problems here. So you can rest assured, no matter what you're shooting, especially in high speed, this thing's going to keep up no problem. As always, here are a few more of my favorite shots to date with this lens. Yeah, I just really can't say enough about it. It is great optically, and we'll get into more of that in a second, but a few more things to note. It does have 11 aperture blades that's going to contribute to its beautiful bokeh and transitions, and its impressive but variable minimum focus distance starting at just 1.32 feet means you can get really up close and personal with some of your subjects. Now, if budget isn't an issue, I would fully recommend this lens. It is a masterpiece and unsurprisingly #1 for performance and my overall pick. Next up, we've got the Sony 70-200 f4 Macro Mark II.
First, let's talk quickly about the build and features of this lens. As you can see, a great size. It's actually 15% lighter and shorter than its predecessor. So a great size. It weighs just over 700 grams, so it's not a huge burden. It feels well balanced. The quality's there in terms of the materials used. Of course, it does extend as you zoom a little bit here, but it's got a pretty short throw, I have to say. I'm quite impressed by that. Up front, you've got your focus ring here, and at the back is your zoom ring. Everything kind of fits in your hand. It feels nice and intuitive. And in terms of buttons and switches, we've got not one, not two, but 3 customizable focus hold buttons. We've got an automatic manual focus switch. We've got a full-time manual focus override switch, which is a fantastic feature, which I love to see on pretty much any lens. Next, we've got a focus limiting switch with 3 positions, and of course, optical steady shot or image stabilization built in with 3 modes that works extraordinarily well. On the front, you'll find 72mm filter threads along with Sony's patented coatings to help with ghosting and flare, of course. And on the back, a nice metal mount with a rubber gasket for confidence when it comes to weather sealing. Overall, a great little build. A ton of features. The only thing that it might be missing for some people is an aperture ring that we're seeing on more and more lenses these days, but it's really probably not tailored towards video, although it could definitely be a video tailored lens. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's gonna shoot everything well, whether you're shooting photos or videos, that I promise you.
Here's some examples from my time with this lens. I have to say that this is a great versatile lens for those who love to shoot sports and wildlife and whatnot, but also might want to dive into the macro world.
So it's no secret that I am a big fan of macro photography, and anything that can utilize macro and pretty much anything else you want to shoot is a winner in my books. I love the close minimum focus distance, and I love the ability to shoot macro. Oh, and by the way, you can use 1.4 and 2 times teleconverters to actually convert this thing into a macro beast, shooting a true 1-to-1 reproduction ratio with the 2 times teleconverter. And for me, that's one of the coolest features and just something awesome that Sony's decided to add to their lenses. Next, let's talk about the aperture and the optics a little bit. Now, it's an f4, meaning it's not the fastest lens out there, but it is enough to produce some beautiful out of focus backgrounds. And with 9 aperture blades, the bokeh is quite nice for me. In terms of low light performance, it's decent. Yes, our modern day sensors are very, very good, so pumping up that ISO a little bit when you need to usually isn't an issue. But just keep in mind, if you're needing something crazy fast like an f1.8 or something, well, this really isn't gonna compete. Contrast is great and colors are vibrant, and overall, I really like the quality of images that I'm getting out of this lens.
Impressively, this is going to be the lightest and the most portable lens on our list today. Next up, we've got the long-awaited Sigma 70-200 f2.8 sports lens.
We'll have a look at the overall build and the features of this lens. And in typical Sigma fashion, unsurprisingly, it's a little bit bigger and heavier than, say, the Tamron. It does have a ton of bells and whistles, but it comes in at about 1,345 grams or just under 3 pounds. Now, in terms of buttons and switches, it does have an automatic manual focus switch, a focus limiting switch, of course, that optical steady shot, and a custom dial so you can set your 3 customizable focus hold buttons. It's a lot, I know, but there's actually even more. We've got a click switch and we've got an aperture ring on there. Pretty much every bell and whistle that you could expect on a lens these days. Over here, we've also got a lock switch for that aperture ring, and I'm happy to say that this is actually a completely internally zooming lens. So a little bit more confidence when it comes to heading out and shooting in the weather and the rain and whatnot. The throw is actually really short, going from 70 to 200 and back again, so target acquisition is going to be really nice. For me, it's a little bit unintuitive in terms of the placement. I wish that the focus ring and the zoom ring were kind of swapped. But I digress. It's not a deal breaker and it's pretty easy to get used to. Now on the front here, we've got 77mm filter threads with their patented coatings to help with ghosting and flare. And we do have this bigger sized lens hood here that does attach by a screw mechanism, which is really not my favorite. it kind of gets in the way and you can bump things. I prefer something that you kind of lock on there and unlock, and it just goes on there seamlessly. On the back, we've got a metal mount with a rubber gasket for even more confidence when it comes to weather sealing. And on the bottom, you'll probably notice that, of course, it does have a tripod collar, and it's easily moved around with hard stops, which is nice. But if you are wanting to take this thing off, well, I've got some bad news for you. Unlike the quick release on the Sonys and whatnot, you're gonna have to actually use Allen keys and completely take out the little bolts that are gonna hold this thing into place. There's no quick release. I wish they had just a quick release plate like you see on the Sonys and whatnot, but not a complete deal breaker. You can move it around so it's kind of out of the way depending on the orientation of your camera and what you're shooting, but just worth noting. The overall build feels really good, and it's the Sigma quality that we expect in today's age. Yes, it's a little bit heavy and bigger, but it does have everything you could ever possibly want in terms of those features.
Once again, here are some of my favorite shots with this lens. Yes, it's incredibly sharp, as is all of these lenses on today's list, and it's worth noting that this is more like a bigger and heavier G Master, just at about half the price. So there's that, but again, be aware of the limitations that we discussed earlier, like the shooting speed and the in-camera options, if any. Overall, great value here in the Sigma, and don't forget the hugely long warranty that you get that you don't get with the Sonys. Being somebody who shoots a ton of bird and wildlife photos and is constantly needed to shoot at higher ISOs, I have a secret for you to keep your photos razor sharp and eliminate that unwanted noise. It's called Topaz Labs Photo AI software. This is just the next generation of incredible editing, a drag and drop program that's a buy once and own forever type of thing. And as you can see here, the results speak for themselves. In just a few seconds, you can get professional-like edits, removing noise and sharpening photos, even upscaling, often allowing you to take photos that would have been otherwise useless and making them fantastic. I'm not sponsored by Topaz Labs in any way, I just think it's a fantastic product and have been personally using this software that I bought myself for quite a while now. Check the link in the description if you wanted to pick this software up. Finally, we've got the cheapest lens on our list, the Tamron 70-180 f2.8 G2.
And now let's have a quick look at the build and features of this lens. I'm happy to say that they've done a great job adding features and keeping it basically the same size. A little bit bigger, a little bit heavier than its predecessor. At 855 grams though, completely reasonable if you ask me. They do have that vibration compensation feature in there, and for an extra 50 grams or so, I think that's just a fantastic addition. Now in terms of buttons and switches, all we've got is a little lock switch over here to help with creep. We've got a custom dial, 1, 2, and 3, and that's gonna help to customize your focus hold button here, which you can do using their app. You just plug it in and basically customize how this thing is going to perform. Now that button can be used in a multitude of ways, from a manual automatic focus switch. You can use it from an A to B point of focus. It's really neat what they've done with that, and I think it just adds a ton to their newer lens line. Now in the front here, we've got a nice big and grippy zoom ring. It's quite a short throw from 70 to 180 there, as you can see, just about maybe 1.5 inches out. And at the bottom, we've got a nice metal mount with a rubber gasket for confidence when it comes to weather sealing. On the back here is your manual focus ring. It's small and tactile, but just a little bit out of the way perhaps. Not a big deal, and I don't find myself using the manual focus too much because, well, the autofocus is just so good on this lens. Now close to the bottom, we do have that USB port to access either your phone or the computer, so you can custom dial this thing in just the way you like it. And on the front, we've got 67mm filter threads, same as the original, and all those coatings to help with ghosting and flare that you'd expect from a Tamron lens these days.
This is the cheapest lens on the list, as you know, but do not rule this lens out in terms of performance. It performs extraordinarily well. Here's some of my favorite shots from my full in-depth review, and you can find this lens on sale from time to time, making the value just extraordinary. There aren't a ton of buttons and switches on this lens, it's pretty bare bones, but it does have the newer edition of image stabilization, which is really nice. The optical quality is just fantastic, but it is relatively close in price compared to the Sigma. Both the Sigma and the Tamron have a great long warranty. You'll just have to prioritize whether the smaller weight and size of the Tamron is more beneficial to you over the extra features of the Sigma. It's worth noting that the Tamron has a huge advantage over the Sigma when it comes to close focusing distance. You can get near macro capabilities where the Sigma does struggle to get a little bit closer to your subjects. With all four of these lenses, we're really splitting hairs when it comes to performance. They are just fantastic performers all around. If budget's the biggest consideration, this is an absolute no-brainer, and I would completely recommend it to you. Remember that nobody except you is going to know which lens is going to be best for your application, because everybody's shooting style is going to be totally different. Now I can only give you recommendations based on my experience, but this is how I would rate the performance of these lenses. They're very close, but remember there's also pros and cons to owning a Sony lens over a third party and vice versa. Hopefully this video gave you the information that you needed to make the best choice for you.
So there you have it guys, 4 lenses that I can completely vouch for and recommend. I really hope this video helped you make a decision. If it did help you out, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, join the community. If you want to pick any of these up, I'll drop affiliate links down below, of course, and like always, make mistakes, be yourself, and get out there and take some more pictures. See you next time.